Welcome to the closed session portion of the City Council meeting. I am calling this meeting to order. The time is now 5:30 p.m. Madam Clerk, will you please take roll call?
Councilmember Gama. Here. Councilmember Hernandez.
Here.
Councilmember Martinez.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem McQueen Lejean.
Here.
Mayor Perez.
Here. They took my microphone.
Playing musical chairs with microphones.
We will now hear public comments. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Madam Clerk, does anyone have any public comments?
No public comments.
Thank you. Madam City Attorney, please read the closed session item into the record.
Thank you, Mayor Perez. We have one matter going into closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B1. That is a public employee performance evaluation for the position of city attorney. To the extent there is any reportable action at the beginning of the regular session, we will report out.
Thank you. Do any members of council have any conflicts of interest to disclose for the listed closed session item on the agenda? Thank you. Not seeing any. I will now recess the closed session. The time is now 5:32. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City Council regular meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order. The time is now 6:30 p.m. Please stand and join me in the flag salute. Madam Clerk, will you please take roll call?
Councilmember Gama,
Here.
Councilmember Hernandez,
Here.
Councilmember Martinez,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem McQueen Lejean,
Here.
and Mayor Perez.
Here. Am I hearing feedback? Okay. Tonight's inspiration will be given by Councilmember Hernandez.
Thank you, Mayor Perez. Good evening, everyone. I'm honored tonight to give tonight's inspiration. Last week, Councilman Gama and myself had the privilege of attending a conference in Long Beach. It was the League of California Cities Conference, and we go there to get updated information on legislation, best practices, and to learn from other cities, what other cities are doing. And these are cities from throughout the state of California. So you can imagine there's a lot of people there, there's a lot of interaction, and there's a lot of learning going on. So I want to I want to recognize the importance of networking and leadership. I know there's some young folks in the audience today, and if you want to be a leader, networking is very important, and I'll tell you why. Effective leaders work to create productive relationships that enable all involved to reach mutually beneficial goals and end results. In today's world, productive relationships are increasingly built through networking. Networking and knowledge sharing are some of the best benefits of belonging to an organization, as you have access to peers across service, state, and national boundaries, both online and in person. Networking was really important in this last week for me because we're working on an economic development plan. I was able to talk to other cities and professionals who have been through an economic development process, and they were willing to share their ideas and provide advice on things that we might want to consider as we implement our economic development plan. And it's why we attend these conferences that make them so important, is that we bring back new ideas that we have not, we've not exercised before, maybe not thought of before, and we build relationships. Relationships are, in this business and in any business, very important. And when you can later on pick up the phone and say, hey, I met you at the conference a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about economic development, or we talked about homelessness, or we talked about housing, environmental issues. You know, can you tell me more about what you're doing in your area? It goes a long way, and in the end, it's of great benefit to the city. So I think that's the reason that we value these interactions, and we value attendance and representation at these conferences. So I just want to encourage all of you who are moving up into leadership positions to remember to build relationships and to go out there and network. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hernandez. The next item is the closed session report. Madam City Attorney, will you please provide the closed session report?
Thank you, Mayor Perez. No reportable action.
Thank you. We'll now move on to public comments. Public comments not pertaining to items on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. This process will be the same for comments pertaining to each agenda item. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments?
Yes, we have a public comment from Becky Bruning, and then Donnie Aiken will follow.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, City staff, and audience. I'm here representing Rogaby Outdoors. And on the 27th of this month, we're having our spectacular family fish day out at the end of the pier. And we want everyone to wear their costumes. There will be a prize for first place. We'll be there from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m.
Thank you, Becky.
Good evening, Mayor and council members and residents of Port Hueneme. I'm here tonight because I wanted to introduce myself. I am Donnie Aiken, and I'm running for United Water Conservation Board of Directors Division 6. And I wanted to share with you guys why I'm running and why I chose to run for this position because I wanted to take a stand. I was a little upset at the unethical acts performed by previous board members. So instead of complaining about it, I decided to do something about it and try to be the voice for the community. So I'm running so that I can so I can be a voice for the community so we can have a bigger voice on the board. Right now the board is ag heavy, and all of the concerns we have and the questions we have, well, where I look at it is we can't get answers because we don't have a voice. When we don't have anyone on the board to fight for us, to ask the questions, then then we won't get anything that we need. So I just want to be the person that speaks for the residents, make sure it is fair, it's ethical, transparent, clear leadership throughout the board, and then do my best to represent not just only my division, the residents of Ventura County. Thank you very much and have a great evening.
Thank you.
That concludes public comment.
Thank you. We'll move on to the agenda approval. May I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Do any members of council have any conflicts of interest to disclose for any item on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we will move on to presentations. The first presentation is the Down Syndrome Awareness Month proclamation, and that will be read by Councilmember Hernandez.
Thank you very much, Mayor. This is Down Syndrome Awareness Month, October 2024. Whereas October is designated as Down Syndrome Awareness Month, and whereas Down syndrome is the most survivable genetic difference affecting 1 in every 733 live births in the United States, and whereas trisomy 21, the most common type of Down syndrome, is caused by an extra third copy of the 21st chromosome, and whereas the genes on the extra chromosome interact with other genes causing varying degrees of learning difficulties as well as physical disabilities, the learning difficulties or degree of intellectual disability can be mild to severe, but most commonly falls somewhere in the moderate area. And whereas individuals with Down syndrome have physical characteristics similar to a family or ethnic resemblance, individuals with Down syndrome are also just that, individuals. The effects of the extra chromosome do not affect each person the exact same way. There are common physical characteristics of Down syndrome among individuals. However, the degree of physical characteristics also varies among individuals. And whereas children with Down syndrome are educated in many different ways, however, early intervention and early education are key to the individual development. Some individuals participate in special needs education and also all-inclusive education settings, including extracurricular programs from both of those areas. And whereas many adults with Down syndrome live independently, live in living programs or with their families, many individuals have jobs either working independently or with a job coach. Some individuals attend a day program that focus on special activities. And whereas people with Down syndrome often find a lot of satisfaction in the activities that they participate in and experience. Most individuals with Down syndrome grow, learn, and function well within all communities. One area of strength for individuals with Down syndrome is their social skills, which often exceed their academic achievements and help them to achieve a happy and productive life. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of Port Hueneme hereby recognizes October 2024 as Down Syndrome Awareness Month in the City of Port Hueneme and encourages the community to support the quality of life for individuals with Down syndrome by promoting inclusion, acceptance, community connections, and awareness of individuals with Down syndrome. Proclaimed this 21st day of October 2024, signed by your City Council and the Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Chief Federico?
Good evening, everyone. We invited to present the proclamation to the director of Down Syndrome Association of Los Angeles, Sandra Baker, and her son, Larry. Come on up here, Larry. So, why DSA LA? DSALA is one of the oldest and largest Down syndrome associations in the country. 50 years ago, it was started by a group of parents that wanted to create a more positive culture and society for their children with Down syndrome. And prior to the offshoots over the past 50 years, where we have a Down syndrome association in Santa Barbara and there's some in Orange County, DSALA 50 years later is still the prominent and the biggest and largest provider of fundraising and programs for Southern California, with membership all the way up here, with families still involved up in Ventura, to Moreno Valley, from Santa Clarita down to Orange County. So it's a large network of folks, and the work that continues to be done for advocacy and inclusion has been incredible, but it's because of people like Sandra here, who is the glue of DSALA for many years, and she brings great people together to accomplish great things for our Down syndrome community.
Thank you so much for inviting us here today. We appreciate you and everyone here because, October is the Awareness Month for Down syndrome. And our hope is that our children with Down syndrome are welcome at every community, that they know about our kids and how much they are worth living and being part of your lives as well. So we want them to be part of every single parts of the world and be welcome there. So thank you so much for this, and thank you so much. I don't know, do you want to say thank you?
Mhm.
I'll translate a little bit, but short.
Yeah. Okay. I thank you. I just did much to you. Okay, I just reported to the mom and to my mom to me. I did that like I said, I did mine too. I did the dogs wedding, to mine, and then the mine, and I got to your mom.
So Larry is saying his mom gave birth to him. Anyway, but
And the
thank you so-
son that
thank you.
was my birthday.
And his birthday's coming up. Thank you so much.
Good job, Larry. You're welcome.
The next presentation is the Cybersecurity Awareness Month Proclamation, which I will read. National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, October 2024, whereas October is known as National Cybersecurity Awareness Month and is intended to raise awareness of protecting our data and technologies from malicious hackers and cyber threats. And whereas the theme for Cybersecurity Awareness Month 2024 is Secure Our World. And whereas we recognize the importance of Port Hueneme citizens realizing the positive impacts of our digital future, and whereas we encourage all Port Hueneme residents and city staff to learn about cybersecurity in both their work and home environments, and whereas the city works actively to instruct and test staff email users on social engineering phishing attempts, and whereas while cybersecurity awareness is important to address year-round, Cybersecurity Awareness Month provides a dedicated time to remember each of us has a part to play in keeping ourselves and others safe. Whereas, according to the National Cybersecurity Alliance 2023 OBehave report, 84% of people consider online safety a priority, but only 38% of people use unique passwords for all of their accounts. And whereas, we use this month to honor all of the cybersecurity professionals who are working tirelessly to defend our digital world. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Port Hueneme does hereby recognize October as Cybersecurity Awareness Month and encourages the community to spread awareness for this important cause. And we have our very own Information System Manager, Aaron, come up. Thank you so much. And I am not one of those people that gets creative with my passwords. I'm really lazy. I apologize.
They don't have to be creative as long as you have a password. That's a start. I'd like to say thank you to the current city council and previous city council who have made the investment to perform cybersecurity within the city. I now have a team of 3 who help me, so Curtis helps me with the firewalls, and Melissa, who's in the back listening, has taken over the antivirus software, in addition to all of the team members, including all of you on the dais who are participating in our phishing attempts and are keeping your email. You ask me. If you don't know, ask me before you click on the link. It's the safest thing to do. And that's really, you know, as much as we spend on defense, the weakest link is still that individual human who's tempted to click on that link. And that's the real challenge. So that's why we're spending that extra money to do the training.
All right, well, we appreciate all the work that you do. Are we going to get a picture? Yes? Is any of your staff here? You have any staff? Curtis? Yeah, they don't want to come up. They don't want to come up. Are you going to stand? Go stand with him. Don't let him stand by himself.
I'm used to being an army of one.
Yeah, no kidding, huh?
I get the credit for everything.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. We're just happy that before we could barely read our emails or keep our emails or see our emails, and now it's so much better. Or send our emails. Okay, the next proclamation. Oh, wait. It's, okay, never mind. It's a presentation. Gun Violence Restraining Order presentation by Ventura County Deputy District Attorney Ricole Kelly. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor, council members, staff, and community members. As mentioned, my name is Ricole Kelly. I'm a prosecutor at the Ventura County District Attorney's Office. My current role is the Family Justice Center on-site prosecutor. And one of my duties within that role is to educate the public and spread awareness about a critical tool in gun violence prevention in our community. This tool, many people are not aware of it, but it's referred to as a gun violence restraining order. Many of us have heard of domestic violence restraining orders where a party can receive protection from being contacted by another party, or even civil harassment orders similar in nature. Very few people know about gun violence restraining orders. The difference between those and the domestic violence restraining order or civil harassment order is that a gun violence restraining order doesn't just prohibit or protect one person, it protects the community at large. Essentially, in 2014, a horrific tragedy happened to our neighbors to the north in Santa Barbara County. Elliot Rogers was a very disturbed young man who was exhibiting symptoms of mental illness. He was behaving erratically, and family members and those close to him knew this and went and expressed these concerns, but unfortunately there was no legal mechanism to remove his lawfully possessed firearms. There was nothing that law enforcement could do despite hearing the concerns posed by the family members. Well, unfortunately, as many of you are aware, that resulted in the death of six innocent individuals and the injury of 13, in addition to the death of Elliot Rogers. So the legislature reacted, and they responded. In 2016, they enacted what are known as red flag laws, and that is the gun violence restraining order. The problem with the gun violence restraining order that was enacted in 2016 is that it's only available to law enforcement. And so law enforcement can actually obtain this order in a situation where an individual is at risk of hurting not only others, but also themselves. So if law enforcement receives information that a gun owner or someone who has access to guns is at risk of hurting themselves or others, they can actually obtain one of these gun violence restraining orders and seize those firearms temporarily, even if there's not necessarily a crime committed, but in order to protect both that individual and the public. Well, So up on the screen, you can see an example of the form that law enforcement would fill out to obtain that gun violence restraining order. In 2020, the law expanded. The legislature recognized that there are situations where law enforcement may not be privy to all of the information. And sometimes individuals that are closest to the at-risk person may have information that this individual poses a risk to themselves or others. And so the legislature expanded gun violence restraining orders to include what we now refer to as ex parte restraining orders that can be obtained by certain members of the public. Now, it's open to all members of the public, but you can only obtain a gun violence restraining order against a person if you have a particular relationship with that person. And those relationships are close family members, roommates, employers or coworkers, school teacher or employee, or a former or current dating relationship. And when you think about it, that kind of makes sense. Those are the people who are close to the at-risk individual who would have information about potential gun ownership or any risks that they may be exhibiting, risk factors they may be exhibiting. The process is fairly simple. It involves filling out 6 forms found on the California court's website and filing those with the court. It should be noted that this is a bipartisan supported piece of legislation. I am a Nebraska grown young woman, and I was not so young anymore, and I was raised in a hunting family with lots of access to firearms. So I'm not someone who's about to suggest that we should go out and seize everyone's firearms. This is bipartisan supported and is actually upheld by the Supreme Court because we recognize that in order to protect our Second Amendment rights, we have to impose reasonable measures when people are using them irresponsibly or are at risk of using them irresponsibly. And so the U.S. Supreme Court just this year upheld gun violence restraining orders by saying that the Second Amendment permits the disarmament of individuals who pose a credible threat to the physical safety of themselves or others. And that was the People v. Rahimi case. So what the purpose of this order is essentially, it's not to criminalize, it's not to forever seize someone's guns, but it's in order to allow the individual that might be exhibiting these risk factors to reach a place, take it from a crisis situation to a level-headed, safe gun ownership position. And so what it does is it removes those firearms for a temporary time period between a year up to 5 years to allow that individual to seek treatment, stabilize their behavior, so on and so forth. That can then be reassessed at that point. So there are several examples that you can probably think of. Maybe a school principal or teacher notices that one of her students has been posting violent content online and is making strange remarks, maybe isolating themselves, and has spoken about owning a firearm. That could be a situation that it might be appropriate to consider looking into a gun violence restraining order, maybe a coworker or even a therapist that have similar fact patterns. So the process, like I said, is fairly simple. You fill out those 6 forms. Those forms then are turned in, are filed and provided to a judicial officer who evaluates them to ensure that there's sufficient evidence that this person does in fact pose a risk to themselves or others, and that they have access to firearms. That order is granted then on a temporary basis for 21 days. After 21 days, there's a formal hearing in which the person, the respondent, the person that is exhibiting these risk factors, can reply, can come to court, challenge the evidence against them. They can put on witnesses on their own behalf to determine whether or not a more permanent order for that 1 to 5 years is appropriate. So there is due process. These individuals' rights are certainly being protected, but we're also ensuring that the community is being protected. These are historically extraordinarily underutilized in Ventura County. To date, not a single civilian obtained ex parte GVRO has been obtained. And even amongst law enforcement, the numbers started very small. And as education is increasing, we are seeing a great deal more of them when law enforcement is now aware and can look for these situations that we can protect the community by temporarily removing someone's guns. So we learned that in 2020, over 66% of the public had never even heard of a gun violence restraining order. And many of you here today may be thinking, I'm in that 66%. And also law enforcement. In 2021, only 50% of law enforcement officials had been provided any sort of training on this. So that's why we're seeing those numbers increase. And I think you probably saw that last year we had 46 total. This year, as of September, we already have 42, and so we're on track to actually have more than last year. And so the point in me coming to you today, and thank you so much for allowing me to speak on this issue, because there is no place for gun violence in our community. And the more we are aware and raise awareness and take this information back to our respective communities and in our respective capacities, the more we can arm ourselves with the tools that can prevent gun violence in Ventura County. So if you know somebody who poses a risk to violence to not only the public, but also to themselves, exhibiting suicidal behavior or so on and so forth, I encourage them to contact local law enforcement. The Port Hueneme PD has been trained on this issue. They are aware of it. They are actively, utilizing it when appropriate. But certainly, civilians as well can obtain this type of protection as well.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Does council have any questions?
I'm interested in the cases that you've had thus far, and I'm just wondering, has there ever been a time when you went to retrieve somebody's guns and that person says, you know what, this is good for me right now, please take these away, and then where he or she does the necessary things to get healthy, and then where the guns have been returned to that person yet?
Excellent question. And yes, that has happened. Like I said, these are put in place for between 1 and 5 years, but they can actually be petitioned to be removed before that. And that has happened in certain situations where maybe somebody has gone to get mental health treatment, has shown that their condition has stabilized, whatever crisis situation that they were in that was causing them to demonstrate erratic behavior had subsided. They can then petition to actually have this terminated early and was able to obtain their guns back early. We've also had many situations where the respondent or the person that is being prohibited voluntarily turns over their firearms, understanding the situation is dire. We have a firearm recovery unit that works with the courts. It's actually a grant-funded program through SB 320 that their whole job is to help facilitate the safe removal of firearms from protected persons. I should also note that this is just one mechanism that is really utilized when there isn't a crime necessarily, because if someone is convicted of a felony per se, for example, they become a prohibited person. So this is really when it's more of a mental health situation than a criminal situation. And so that's why it isn't a permanent consequence that's going to haunt them for the rest of their lives, like maybe a felony conviction would. It's just a safe tool that we can utilize. Does that answer your question?
Councilmember Hearn. Oh.
Yes, and it sounds like there's been some success stories, which is great, and that's what we're looking for, is to help people when they're in a crisis, and hopefully, I would imagine there's more suicide prevented than probably anything else.
Yes, I think you're probably right. And it's difficult to track statistics specifically on this because we don't know how many violent acts we may have prevented or suicidal acts we may have prevented, but we do know that these have been successful and people have had good long-term outcomes as a result. Thank you.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm probably part of that 66%. My question is, what are you, with the rampant occurrence of public school shootings, private schools too, what are you doing to educate parents and students at our local schools here in Ventura County?
We are definitely seeking, so with my role as the Family Justice Center and the Ventura County District Attorney's Office as a whole, our goal is to spread awareness. So we, obviously law enforcement was stop number one because they are the ones that are there when tensions are most high, when the situation is at the most critical stage. But now we're getting out and informing the public. We're working on getting in with the school district. We're in communication with getting in and training the school districts, specifically because teachers, principals, school employees are one of the parties that are outlined to be able to obtain these gun violence restraining orders. And so that's a good start, but certainly we're getting out in the community and doing as many trainings as possible. Certainly, if any of you have any requests for training or any options, please feel free to take down my information. I would love to go and meet with them. My investigators are wonderful. They're very well trained. This is their specialty. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Give our regards to Eric for us. Thank you.
We will do that.
Any questions for you? So I have a question regarding the mental health aspect of this. It's an up and down roller coaster for people who suffer from mental illness. Do you require therapists, counselors to be involved in the determination process of whether a person's able to get their firearms back?
So it's a case-by-case basis. So depending on the situation, that definitely could be something that's required by the court. For each gun violence restraining order that is granted, and we refer to the ones that are between 1 and 5 years as a permanent gun violence restraining order, despite that being a bit of a misnomer. And so the court would ultimately determine what was appropriate on a case-by-case basis. So yes, certainly if it was someone who had demonstrated significant mental health issues that needed some treatment, some counseling, some rehabilitation, whatever it looked like for that particular person, the judicial officer would determine whether or not any treatment they had obtained was appropriate and sufficient to terminate the gun violence restraining order. We can also file to renew said gun violence restraining order if, say, the year or 5 years it has come to an end and we've not seen any evidence that there's been any steps or measures taken to address the mental health concerns. So yeah, it's definitely a case-by-case basis, because you can imagine there are some circumstances that it maybe isn't necessarily a mental health situation so much as some other external factor that was affecting the situation. So the judicial officer ultimately makes that determination.
And this might be the same question or the same answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Aside from mental health, say anger issues or whatever the initial reason was that brought this up, is there a requirement, or is it still a case-by-case basis as to them going to treatment before they can petition the court to get their guns back? Not just mental health, but other types of treatment.
I'm going to give you the most lawyerly answer there is, and it depends. I'm sorry. It is a case-by-case basis, like you said, but there may be additional considerations as well. Like, for example, if it is a domestic violence type circumstance in which that the guns were initially seized using an emergency gun violence restraining order, what that may be is we may not end up going the gun violence restraining order route because there was a domestic violence criminal case filed that would encompass the mental health batterers treatment services that they're required to engage in before they would ever obtain their guns back. So it does depend a lot. Additionally, for example, if someone is taken on a 5150 hold, mental health hold, they would also be a prohibited person under that statute as well. So that would be separate and apart from the gun violence restraining order. So there's, like I said, several mechanisms to remove someone's firearms when appropriate. This is just one of the many. And so it is sort of the one that kind of catches some of those cases that are missed by the felony conviction prohibition. Maybe someone didn't rise quite to the level of a involuntary mental health hold under Welfare and Institution Code 5150, but they were making threats, they were exhibiting some erratic behavior, and they had access to firearms. That would be where this would kind of catch those cases that are missed by those other areas.
And just statistical questions. How many counties in California have something similar?
So it is a state law, it is state legislation, so every county has them. But as indicated by the study, unfortunately, a great deal of the public and law enforcement are not well trained on them. So Ventura County is definitely trying to stay on the front end of that by getting out and educating our public as well as our law enforcement. I do think, statistically speaking, we have relatively high numbers commensurate with our per capita. I couldn't tell you the exact breakdown because unfortunately many counties are not keeping stats as well as Ventura County and the district attorney's office is. But every county has them, and actually several states have similar laws as well.
That was my next question. How many states?
I believe last count was 28 states have similar legislation at this point, and several others are pending legislation.
Got it. Okay. I have any further questions for Ms. Kelly? I have nothing, yeah?
Can I just note, kind of along with that, I know our police department has worked closely with the DA's office to get familiar with this and to utilize this. So we actually are utilizing these. Our police department is working with the DA's office to do that when needed. So.
Okay.
And if I can say thank you to Deputy DA Kelly, I'm so grateful to you that you reached out to me about bringing this presentation. It's very important information for our community, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me this
Thank you
evening.
for coming. We'll now move on to the consent calendar. We will consider items on the consent calendar which will be enacted in one motion unless a council member has a request to remove an item for discussion. Are there any items that we'd like to have removed for discussion? Okay, can I get a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar?
Move approval?
Second?
Madam Clerk?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Move on to we have no public hearings tonight, so we'll move on to business items. The first item is smoking in multi-unit residential buildings, consideration of city regulations.
Thank you, Mayor. And we've discussed this previously at council, and we were requested to do some additional research, provide some additional information. So Deputy City Manager Charles Peretz is going to walk us through some of the additional research and discuss some options.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, City Council, members of the public, fellow city staff members. So this item is provided in response to the City Council's request for some research and some information about options regarding smoking prohibitions in multi-unit housing properties. The item is intended to allow Council to receive and consider relevant information, receive any additional public comment on the matter, and then ultimately provide staff with direction. So by way of quick background, at the November 20th, 2023 council meeting, we had several public speakers who shared comments expressing concerns about the impacts of smoking within multi-unit housing properties. And at that time, the council received some information from those speakers about other cities that had adopted smoking regulations at those types of properties. The council's request, staff returned at the December 4th, 2023 meeting with information about Port Hueneme's ordinance, smoking ordinance that is, as well as information about smoking ordinance in the city of Moore Park, which had adopted a ban on smoking within multi-unit housing properties. There was a recommendation that council provided to staff to obtain additional information by conducting outreach within the city. The city conducted a survey and provided council with the results at a July 1st, 2024 meeting. At that time, staff was tasked with gathering additional information from both the city of Carpinteria and cities within Ventura County who have adopted smoking bans on multi-unit housing properties. So, quick summary of some research that was done. According to an October 2024 report from the American Non-Smokers' Rights Foundation, a total of 85 of the 483 municipalities in the state of California have enacted smoking bans in 100% of their multi-unit housing rental properties. 78 of those prohibit smoking in both rented and owner-occupied units. Separately, there are 16 municipalities that have opted for partial smoking bans, and while those can take different types of forms, most commonly the partial smoking bans are enacted by prohibiting smoking in newly occupied buildings and or newly leased units. Moore Park and Ojai are the only cities in Ventura County that have multi-unit housing smoking bans. In this summer, Carpinteria, which the council previously inquired about, approved a smoking ban, which is scheduled to be effective next July. So the ordinance of the three cities, Carpinteria, Ojai, and Moore Park, which were researched, are similar in many ways, including their definition of what a multi-unit residence is, the types of smoking activities that are prohibited, the requirements that are imposed on, and the protections that are provided for landlords. And lastly, they are similar in their approach to enforcement. All three prohibit smoking inside private units, which is inclusive of balconies, patios, porches, and within common areas of these buildings. Ojai, notably, provides an exemption for private units that have separate ventilation systems. Cannabis is prohibited by all three of the ordinances. However, Carpinteria exempts cannabis that is used for medicinal purposes. These cities also impose similar requirements on landlords, and all three do provide liability protections for landlords that comply with the requirements of their ordinances. Lastly, it's important to note that these cities expressed a similar approach to enforcement. All three rely heavily on the property owner or manager and do not utilize significant staff resources to cite or follow up on potential violations. During the last council discussion on the issue, staff was requested to review and consider a public comment that was received from the Vice President of Public Affairs for the California Apartment Association. That comment suggested that any consideration of an ordinance include all types of smoking, inclusive of marijuana, allow for an adequate phase-in period for any ordinance considered, not require landlords to install no smoking signs, and provide landlords with liability protections that they would otherwise be subject to for tenant violations. With the exception of the request regarding signage, all of the other suggested inclusions in an ordinance are consistent with the cities that were researched. During staff's research on the issue, it was noted that the American Lung Association, which produces the annual State of the Tobacco Report Card, had incorrect information about Port Hueneme's smoking ordinance. After contacting the organization and providing corrected information, the city's grade was changed from an F to a C. It should be noted that the calculation allowed the city to fall 1 point short of a B. And any modification that imposes additional smoking restrictions would assuredly bring the city's grade up beyond a C, and either a B or an A, depending on what was adopted. And then once again, as noted, the item allows the City Council to receive and consider relevant information, as well as any additional public input. Council has the option to direct staff to draft an ordinance that would be similar to the cities that were researched and return in the future for potential adoption, or draft a multi-unit housing ordinance that differs from the definitions, restrictions, or other criteria from the cities that were researched, or determine that no modification to the city's smoking ordinance is needed at this time. That concludes the staff's presentation. I'm available for any questions that the council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Peretz. Does council have any questions for staff at this time? Oh, yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Peretz, for your presentation. I know that we've been working this issue as long as I've been on council, almost since 2019, right? Councilman Gama? Yeah, our first meeting, that's right. So I'm wondering, our duty today, our responsibility is to consider options to modify the city's smoking ordinance, and I'm wondering if the staff has a recommendation or can better outline for us what those options might be.
I think sort of as a starting point, just the one point that I think I've made the last couple times we brought it is that typically I don't recommend adopting ordinances that the city won't or can't enforce. That's a kind of a rule that I typically stick to. I don't believe in just ceremonial ordinances. I think that the one interesting thing we saw when we researched this and when we did that survey to the landlords, I think that was a big one, is that the landlords are actually saying that they would support this. And I think that matches with when we look at other cities and how they've structured these, is they've made it clear that the city isn't going to enforce it, but we're empowering landlords to enforce it. And so although my general rule is if we're not going to enforce it, don't adopt it, I think that that is something the city council could consider in essentially saying if the landlords are supporting this and they're asking us to give them another tool, we're giving them that tool. And so I think at this point, the question of whether to have the policy or not is up to the council. If the council chooses to have a policy, we would recommend a similar approach to the one that Ojai, Moore Park, and Carpinteria took. They're pretty consistent in empowering landlords to be able to make sure their tenants are following these rules. So one possibility would be council could give staff direction to draft an ordinance similar to those cities, and then if there's any specific modifications that are desired, but draft an ordinance similar to those, and then we would have to come back to council. We would have to talk about that, and the council would have to adopt it, which also gives another opportunity for the public to comment about any concerns. So I think if you were to tell us we have to make a firm recommendation today, it would be that we can move forward with that process. So.
Okay, so thank you for that. So based on what I've heard in the presentation and read in the report, it sounds like the three cities that are presented here provide a good template for us to look at. I do support the idea of putting the onus on the landlords or HOAs to enforce. I would also suggest considering separate ventilation systems that would be more flexible for those units that have separate ventilation systems. I do have concern about cannabis and what this might do to our cannabis businesses. I hope that anything that we adopt with regards to cannabis doesn't work against the businesses. If we somehow can find a way around that, I would suggest we do that. And then I do want to, before I make any other comments, want to hear public comment as well.
Mayor Pro Tem, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just a couple. I was reading, first question is, currently, do property owners have the ability to require no smoking in their properties?
Yeah, I'll ask the city attorney to correct me if I misstate anything. Although the city has no restriction in place, I'm not aware that there's anything prohibiting a private property owner from creating such a rule.
I just add to that. I've done a couple similar ordinances, so I've had a lot of interactions with the property owners and landlords and tenants. And typically what you hear is the landlord's concern is that if they do it and they don't have the backing of the city, that they are then liable and they could be sued. And there's, and it's essentially them versus the tenant. So the landlords can require it, but it's one of those things, and we get there a few topics like this where landlords will say, well, if the city would do it, then we'd have a little bit more backing, or we wouldn't have to worry about the potential for litigation. So.
Okay. Second question would be, if we have an ordinance that we're saying up front that we're not going to enforce, does that put the city on the line if there were any legal implications?
So I think that the approach we would take would be, we would say that the city would not plan to do any sort of regular enforcement of this ordinance. However, we reserve the right to enforce in egregious cases. An example would be if somebody's clearly smoking and breathing into their neighbor's, house on purpose, and the landlord isn't able to get them to comply, that the city could write a citation in that case, but that we wouldn't have a regular enforcement mechanism. We wouldn't allocate staff hours to enforcing. If we followed that approach, I wouldn't anticipate that there'd be liability, because in the most egregious cases we would respond, and in other cases it would be left to the landlords. I guess the city attorney can chime in if I missed anything.
I concur with Mr. Vega that it is highly unlikely that the city could be liable for not performing code enforcement activities. It's very unusual to see that sort of litigation, and it, at least in my recollection, has never been successful against a public agency.
I'll just add that the approach to enforcement that we've discussed and that the city managers indicated would be the city's approach is consistent with how the other 3 cities that we researched have approached their enforcement. And I did communicate with representatives at each of those 3 cities, and that was not a concern nor an experience that they have had.
Okay, a couple of more questions, so just bear with me for a while. So in the Ojai ordinance, I guess would be under 510.15 violation of penalties, number C. They're all, when I read it, it almost seemed like they were actually doing some enforcement. So is that not the case? I may have read that wrong.
It's not the case. 510, I'm sorry, can you give me the citation once more?
5-10.15. C.
Yeah, I believe, I'm going to pull it up real quick, but I believe I recall seeing, so they almost as the city manager was referring to, they reserve the right to enforce, but in speaking with them about the practice and how it has been dealt with, they have not. All 3 cities, actually Carpentry, I believe, specifies that it is subject to civil action by private parties. The other ones really look at it as an opportunity for education. They'll make anybody calling in aware of, and the most that they'll do as far as outreach is to contact the potentially offending party to make them aware of the city ordinance, and then communicate with the property owner or landlord to make sure they're aware of the alleged violation.
Okay, a couple of more questions, Mayor, if that's okay. So on the, let's see, you had it in your presentation where you showed the grades of the different cities.
You're going to take my question.
Yeah, so it says C, B minus C. So my question is, so Ojai and, is it Moore Park?
Moore Park.
So we have the same grade with them without their ordinance that they currently have in place. But Ventura and Oxnard has a B and they don't have one in place. So can you tell us a little bit about maybe some criteria? Is it is some density have to do with something or not?
There's a number of different categories that go into the report, the State of Tobacco Annual Report. The categories are smoke-free outdoor air, smoke-free housing, reducing sales of tobacco products, and then there's an emergency issues bonus. So the smoke-free housing category is one category, and the points throughout the scoring system are of different values. So each category can only award you a certain amount. So even if you've done everything that the American Lung Association wishes for you to do in the category of multi-unit housing, you can only get so many points in that category. So it really speaks to definitions and restrictions in other areas. The smoke-free outdoor air category is the largest and most expansive. You get the most points there. Regulations on tobacco control and flavored tobacco products are a separate category where you can get additional points. So while your statement is true, the purpose of this agenda item is focusing on one of the categories within their analysis.
Got it. This, I promise, is my final question, Councilmember Gama. As I was reading the entire agenda item here, there was some reference to what I thought was private properties. And so this is kind of the question that came up the last time we met and had the discussion about this. So can you tell me, are there situations to where a person who have purchased their home and owns their home will have to be under an ordinance where they couldn't smoke in their own home? Could we have that?
So based on the definitions of the other ordinances and what is proposed within the staff report, single-family homes would be excluded from this ordinance. And it really speaks to how we define the term multi-unit residence. So obviously that's an open question subject to the direction of the council, but commonly it's defined as 2 or more units on a property, apartment buildings, condominiums, et cetera. The exclusion is that properties in single-family zoning, if they were to add an ADU, those also would be exempt from this smoking prohibition.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question. So while I don't smoke, I do live in a townhouse that we have paid for. And the units are tied by a wall, but I own the home. Could I fall under this ordinance?
The simple answer is yes. The real full answer is it depends how we define multi-unit residence. But the most basic definition and the report that I've provided, most of the ordinances that have been adopted by most of the 85 cities do include both homes that are rented as well as homes that are owner-occupied.
Okay, so I'm speaking now for the 200-plus residents in my neighborhood. So this is not just about me. It's about, and I know for me it expands to the city. But right now, I'm sure that my residents in my community want me to ask these specific questions. So thank you for taking the time to respond to them. Thank you.
I was going to have some questions, but she kind of beat me to them, so. But I will go to Mr. Gama, yes?
Thank you. Looking at my friend here, Galen Vick, and he lives in Surfside 4, which is a multi-story condominium, which is owned individually, scattered as you go through the whole big place. And there could be, I don't know, Galen, 30% are renting out their properties perhaps, give or take a few. So I don't see how that applies the way this is written up, because the way I envision it, and I want to say hello to the kids in the audience, and I want to make sure that you understand that we don't have the resources to enforce, and this is why we're having these discussions. And when you have a place like Surfside 4 with multi-floors and multi-owners, and some that are living there and some that are renting it, I would think, just like Councilmember Lejeune said, that this would be a really welcomed ordinance for our city. But is it enforceable on the individual owner? And does that individual owner who wants to smoke in his house, 'cause I do know there's a few smokers over there that smoke in their house and it affects their neighbors. Does this ordinance address that? And I don't think it does, from what I've heard.
Well, I would say that we don't have an ordinance before, so it's ultimately the council can give that direction today. You know,
Okay.
we recommended, you know, just with our current resources, we would have to hire someone to enforce this, right? We don't really have like a staff person right now that could really enforce this aggressively. And so we recommend that if we were to adopt it similar to the other cities, that we wouldn't enforce it. The council could ask us to look at other options or come back with an ordinance that says something different than that.
Right, because I lived in Beachport Villas, and there's a number of condominiums that are connected, and I had a neighbor that was smoking, I don't know, 3 packs a day inside their house, and it was creeping into my house. So,
Yeah.
you know, I think we understand the issue with the multi-unit apartments where the ventilation is shared, and kids that are wanting to go to high school in the morning free from smelling like smoke may be waking up with breathing issues and frustrated, and so I know we want to accommodate and put the ordinance for that scenario. But I just want to make sure that we're complete in trying to help out Surfside 4s and the other Surfsides where, you know, you have individual owners of multi-units that are stacked and may have separate ventilation systems, as did I, but that did not prevent the problem from creeping through my walls.
So as one of the slides in the presentation indicated, I think as the city manager outlined, there is no ordinance before you, but one of the key questions that we would look for direction from the council is what will be prohibited? The extent of smoking, whether to include cannabis or not, and the locations. Would it be specific to rental properties, or would it be all units within multi-unit housing?
Or I would even perhaps suggest a common wall. Believe it or not, the house that I live in has a common wall with my neighbor, which is very unique to our neighborhood, but there's only like 4 or 5 of them. But again, if there's a situation where my neighbor rented out to a bunch of party animals who are just blowing smoke inside the house all day, it would be a problem for me. You know, that's what I'm.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Council, I think that the common wall might be another key word to consider.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the operative word is the multi-unit residence, and I know that the future leaders of America understand what the intent is behind their proposed legislation. So I would like to ask them to come up and
We
let's
do
hear
have
that-
public comments.
Yeah,
Yes.
deliver their public comment, because I think it's very clear. I don't think it's a matter of whether they're owned or rented. We're talking about multi-unit residences. That's 2 or more. It could be a duplex, it could be Surfside 4, it could be a common wall, because you're sharing, it's more than 2 units. I live in Las Palomas. I have shared attics, a common wall. Luckily, I'm an N unit, but I have a shared wall with, and then there's 5 units in line. So that is a multi-unit residence. And I would, if we had an ordinance affecting multi-unit residents, we would fall under that category. I think the same applies to Marlboro, where you live.
Any no further questions? I'm going to move
I'm
to
sorry,
public comments.
just one more question. So when those multi-units like Las Palomas, when an owner is smoking in his house, this ordinance would say you can't do that. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, because it's not about, and I'm sure the speakers will speak about this, it's not about whether that person owns or rents the property. It's whether the person next door is being subjected to the smoke against their will. So the ownership status isn't.
Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this?
Yes, we have public comments. I'm actually going to call all your names up, so if you want to come up, and then you can just state your name before you speak, and that'll help me out. So Areli Garcia, Abraham S. Hernandez, Crystal Echeverria, Jose Martin, Estrella Garcia, Dominic Velasquez, and Javier Garnica. As each person speaks, I will restart the timer.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Thank you guys for your time. I'm Arely Garcia. I'm Port Hueneme's Future Leaders of America president. The CDC reports that tobacco contains over 7,000 chemicals, many of which are toxic and can cause serious health issues, including lung cancer and heart disease. A smoke-free environment enhances the overall quality of life in our community. It promotes a cleaner, safer living space, reduces fire hazards, and can lead to increased property values. Many potential renters and buyers prioritize smoke-free environments, making our city more attractive to families and individuals seeking healthier living conditions. Passing this ordinance aligns with public health goals and supports efforts to reduce smoking rates in our community. We understand that some of y'all might be worried about dispensary and smoke shop profits, but I think we can have both strong businesses and strong policies. It sends a strong message that Port Hueneme prioritizes the health of its residents. I urge the city to adopt this ordinance for benefits of all residents. Thank you for considering this important issue. Thank you guys for your time.
Good evening, Council. My name is Abraham Hernandez, and I am a community member with Future Leaders of America. I am here today to express my support for smoke-free multi-unit housing ordinance in the city of Port Hueneme because the cost of smokers in multi-unit housing compared to smoke-free units is high. Units that have gone through heavy smoking can cost up to $3,000 more to clear and refurbish, putting a burden on the property owners. I currently live in apartments, and from personal experience, the smell of one smoker can seep through and contaminate the rest of the units, which can cause harm to the residents and especially to the adolescents. Thank you for your time.
Hello, everyone. My name is Crystal Cheveria. I'm here today with Future Leaders of America. I'm here to express my concern about second and third-hand smoke. Port Hueneme prides themselves on the quality of life, highlighting its clean air as a benefit to its residents. Yet we ignore the health and safety of our residents living within apartments and condominiums where families are affected by secondhand smoke. As someone who lives in multi-unit housing myself, I have seen the effects that second and third-hand smoke have caused. I often find myself having to smell the smoke from outside and hold my breath in order to protect my health, which is something I shouldn't do. Not only does the secondhand smoke affect me, but my family members as well. I have a baby nephew who I can't help but worry for his own personal health when secondhand smoke fills the air. Statistics show that more than 1 in 3 non-smokers who live in rental housing are exposed to secondhand smoke. I represent those 1 in 3 people. Secondhand smoke shouldn't have to be an issue that I have to worry about. It's especially not an issue I should have to worry about in order to be healthy. I deserve the right to a healthy body as much as anyone else, and it shouldn't be limited to me just because I live in an apartment. Let us act in the best interest of our residents by taking action on a smoke-free multi-unit housing policy to ensure our community remains smoke-free. Thank you.
Good evening, council members. My name is Estrella Garcia. I am the Vice President with Future Leaders of America. I'm here today to express my support for a smoke-free multi-unit housing ordinance for the city of Port Hueneme. A smoke-free MUH ordinance would benefit both tenants and property owners. Smoking itself causes many negative effects to the smoker, but it also endangers those around them and impacts the well-being of the household. Most tenants find secondhand smoke entering their residence from a neighboring apartment to be discomfort, but for some, it can cause serious illness that can lead to residents to seek legal action under the Federal Fair Housing Act, requiring reasonable accommodations in their building. Landlords who ignore these issues of smoking face a growing likelihood of lawsuits. According to the California Apartment Association, a study conducted showed that a vacated smoking unit cost the owner an average of $4,935 to turn over. Therefore, a smoke-free housing policy may reduce potential legal liability for property owners. Implementing such policies not only helps protect tenants from the harmful effects of secondhand smoke, but also safeguards property owners from the significant financial burdens associated with turnover costs and legal disputes. By proactively addressing these concerns, landlords can create a healthier living environment and potentially save thousands of dollars in maintenance and legal fees, making smoke-free housing a prudent and cost-effective choice. Moreover, reports indicate that apartment turnover can be 2 to 7 times greater when smoking is allowed, compared to the cost of maintaining and turning over a non-smoking unit. This is because smoking inside a multi-unit household leads to extensive and costly repairs for the property owners. For instance, smoke residue can seep into walls, carpets, and ventilation systems, necessitating deep cleaning or even replacement of those materials. Additionally, the lingering odor of smoke often requires specialized treatment to eliminate, which adds to the expense. Repainting walls, replacing carpets, and thorough cleaning of HVAC systems are just a few of the costly measures that property owners must undertake to make a previously smoked-in multi-unit habitable for new tenants. These expenses could quickly add up, making smoking in multi-unit houses not only a healthy concern, but also a significant financial burden for those property owners. Therefore, we understand that implementing a smoke-free multi-unit houses will decrease liability and reduce the cost of turning over a unit. We can further understand that these numerous economic benefits to going smoke-free. By adopting this ordinance, we can protect the health of residents and reduce cost of property owners, creating a healthier and more financially stable community for all. Thank you.
Good evening, board members. My name is Dominic Velasquez, and I am an intern for Future Leaders of America. And as a community member, I'm here today to express my support for a smoke-free multi-unit housing ordinance in the city of Port Hueneme. This ordinance will help the families within our community who are impacted by secondhand smoking. Secondhand smoking contributes to lots of health problems. Passing this ordinance would help improve the overall health of the community. The CDC has stated that secondhand smoking alone kills about 41,000 non-smokers per year. We cannot allow this to happen within our city. More than half of the population of Port Hueneme lives inside multi-unit housing with their families and children. This means that more than half of our community is getting exposed to the effects of secondhand smoking. This is impacting lots of community members and leading to lots of respiratory health concerns. We can't have this going unnoticed. This is affecting the health of future generations. That's why I asked the board to vote for this ordinance. Thank you for your time and consideration, and have a good evening.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Jose Martin. I work for Future Leaders of America. Currently, 70 municipalities in the area, including Moorpark, Morro Bay, Carpinteria, and Guadalupe, have passed laws to ban smoking in all private units of rental multi-unit housing properties to protect their residents. With Port Hueneme, there would be 3 cities within the Ventura County that would have an ordinance in place. Some multi-unit complexes already have a regulation in place, but is not enforced. If this ordinance is passed, it would help property owners and landlords reinforce the regulations by city law. With this many people who have spoken and have yet to speak about the support of multi-unit housing ordinance, a vote should be placed today and not postponed any further. No one should sacrifice their health for affordable housing. If you all feel like you do not have enough information about second and third hand smoke in multi-unit housing, then y'all should respond to your emails, because we have been reaching out to you all and have not heard back. Thank you.
Hello, City Council members. My name is Javier Garnica. I am the Port Hueneme Youth Organizer with Future Leaders of America. And I'm here again to show my support for a smoke-free multi-unit housing ordinance. According to the American Lung Association, the city of Port Hueneme had an overall smoking policy grade of a D as of 2024. We noticed that the grade was incorrect and the actual grade is a C. Nevertheless, making these changes to the ordinance will positively impact the health of our residents and our city's overall grade. If these changes to the ordinance are passed, that will bump up our overall grade from a C to a B, or maybe even an A, depending on what changes are made to the ordinance. For the health of Port Hueneme youth and residents, it is worth taking the necessary actions to prevent exposure to second and third-hand smoke and pass a smoke-free multi-unit housing ordinance. As I said, we have been coming for quite a while now. Our youth have been resilient in their efforts. If it weren't for their hard work and care for this issue, we wouldn't be here today at the city chamber. Therefore, I will take the moment to uplift their advocacy efforts. They make me proud, and I hope you feel proud for them as well. Our youth have done their part, and now we hope you do yours by making these changes to the smoking ordinance. If the ordinance is adopted, Future Leaders of America is committed to exploring ways to actively collaborate with Port Hueneme City staff on their community education efforts in 2025 to ensure multi-unit housing property owners and tenants are informed about the ordinance. And we can also connect y'all with the Public Health Law Center if y'all need support in drafting up an ordinance. They have been very helpful, and they're very willing to collaborate. I know they did that with Carpinteria. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Galen Vick, and after Mr. Vick will be Bob Grigg.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. Just some technology or some science behind this. I worked in the industry where we had clean rooms for manufacturing, class 10,000, class 1,000 clean rooms. We had to actually screen employees. Anyone who smoked couldn't work in those. They'd bring debris into the clean rooms, even if they hadn't smoked for a day or two. So smoking is really toxic for individuals. When I was a young man, I started smoking at age 16. By the time I was 21, I was at 2.5 packs a day. Now, I know that didn't do me any good at all, okay? We as a society have started saying that, hey, smoking in any form is dangerous. We know this. We don't need scientists to tell us this anymore. Today, as Council Member Gama mentioned, I live in Surfside 4, and there we have multi-story buildings, and my neighbors are good neighbors. They don't make a lot of noise. I mean, maybe they do, I just don't hear them. Maybe I'm the one that's making the noise. But from time to time, I'll smell smoke, different flavors of smoke, okay? And I go, why am I having to put up with that? I bought a home. It's an expensive home, okay? And why isn't there some ordinance? But it's not so much an ordinance to be enforced by the city's police. When we as a society say, we're just not going to do something, it deters it overall. So whatever you do here today or in the future, please think and keep in mind that this is going to help us change our philosophy about what smoke does to people. So whether it's vapor, whether someone's making a living off of this type of smoke or not. Someone said something about medical cannabis. I think one of the things that was nice when I went to a Sister Cities meeting, they took me through a cannabis shop and they showed me all the forms of cannabis, and almost all cannabis can be switched to a pill form or something. So if someone has a medical issue, they can switch from smoking it to eating or chewing on it. So clean air is something we should all want for ourselves. We have a couple of examples next to us that have been toxic in the past, and nothing was done about it. What is it? Haliber?
Halico.
Halico, thank you. Halico, I've just been reading reports on that and how we ignored it for so many years. I need to stop right now? I'll stop then. But we should really be worried about our clean air. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Bob Grigg?
Bob Grigg, and I live over at Surfside 4 too. By the way, it's real easy. If you pass the ordinance, as far as the individual people that are renting out their units, the association would just pass an ordinance, a local thing saying, this is illegal here, and if someone has a problem, they'll report it to the management, and people will get a notice in the mail. You wouldn't have to do the individual homeowners to actually enforce it all. By the way, my understanding is that Anacapa View has already done this. I don't know if you guys know about that, but it is a smoke-free place. There's signs up. I've talked to the residents there. They have one little smoking area at the top of the stairs, and they've had that for 2-3 years now. You might want to talk to them. And you're not even allowed to smoke in your unit there, and that's been there for some time. And I stood before this council 30 years ago when they were looking at a much less smoking ordinance, which was unceremoniously voted down. And I remember at the time I said, this was in the 90s. And I said, Port Hueneme has a reputation of being a dirty city. And one of the council members took very umbrage with that. But that was back when we had the port with all the diesel exhaust coming down on our porches all the time. The building inspector told me he had places here that were grandfathered that had dirt floors. And so we're coming along. Okay, so I really appreciate you guys considering this, even though it's now 30 years later. And this was all, should have been done 30 years ago. I'm sorry. You guys are still way behind where all the science says it should be. So I hope to do it. By the way, the thing about separate ventilation system, if I have a separate ventilation system, but if I'm exhausting it, I don't understand that. So what if I have a ventilation system, but I've got to exhaust my air somewhere, and then my neighbors, where's the exhaust going? Unless it's going to the roof away from their windows, then maybe yes. It depends on how it's configured. If it just goes out my wall, no difference. And one of the things, I look at this as going, I'm sure some of you are aware of the idea of the blue cities, where people tend to live longer. And this is moving us toward that type of thing. Blue city is a continuum. So you're moving closer and closer to being a blue city, which is very advantageous to be known as. One of the other comments is that Singapore, which is a massive urban area, has the longest life expectancy in the world of any urban area. And they do it by doing little nudges like this. They try and configure things so that people are encouraged to do healthy things. Smoking used to be the, 9 seconds, the #1 preventable cause of death that you could do on your own, and now it's number 2. This is moving it toward that. Thank you.
Thank you. No further comments?
I have 2 written public comments.
Okay.
So, my name is Cindy, and I am a member of Future Leaders of America. I am here today to express my concern about second and third-hand smoke in our city. As a concerned teenager, I urge our city leaders to address the harmful effects of second and third-hand smoke in our community. Exposure to smoke in public spaces, workplaces, and home poses serious health risks, especially for vulnerable populations like children and seniors. I support stricter regulations and education initiatives to protect residents from these invisible dangers. Let's clear the air and create a healthier city for all. And the next one, dear Port Hueneme City Council members, we are aware you are discussing smoking in multi-unit residential buildings, consideration of city regulations at tonight's City Council meeting. As you consider the health of the community, we would like to share information as well. As research findings from the University of Southern California, which we hope will be using your consideration of the development of future regulations. Secondhand smoke, SHS exposure in multi-unit housing and outdoor spaces is a serious health threat given that secondhand smoke from tobacco, e-cigarettes, and marijuana drifts into housing units from neighboring units, balconies, patios, and both indoor and outdoor common areas. We know that SHS smoke exposure can have both short and long-term health risks, especially for people with existing health conditions like asthma, other respiratory conditions, heart disease, and cancer. At USC, we conducted a research study entitled Triangulum Tobacco, E-Cigarettes, Marijuana, Secondhand Smoke Exposure, and Low Socioeconomic Multi-Unit Housing under the guidance of Principal Investigator Dr. Lourdes Basconde Garbonati. We asked tenants if they would support a smoke-free, vape-free policy in their housing complex. And overwhelmingly 86% of all survey respondents were in favor. Among tobacco smokers, 81% were in favor, and among marijuana smokers, 72% were in favor of a smoke-free, vape-free policy in their housing complex. Even individuals who smoke are in favor of smoke-free, vape-free policies. Attached is a copy of a research slide we previously presented to the Bell Garden City Council. In summary, smoke-free air protections for all multi-unit housing properties have the potential to protect residents, especially children, the elderly, and people with disabilities from the harmful effects of secondhand smoke. We hope that this research can educate and inform your decisions. Please let me know if you have any questions our team may be able to answer. Thank you, Yaneth Rodriguez. And that concludes public comment.
Thank you. So we have before us a recommendation to review the attached information regarding smoking prohibitions. In multi-unit housing, consider options to modify the city's smoking ordinance and to provide staff with specific directions. Can I have a motion with a specific direction and a second?
I'd like to move drafting a resolution of our own to recognize everything that we've spoken about tonight and taking the best and drafting it for the special uniqueness of our city.
Did you get that, Georgiana?
Yes, I just wanted to confirm, you said resolution or ordinance? Okay.
And is there a second to Councilmember Gama's?
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion before we take a vote?
Yeah, just, if
Okay.
you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
Just want to clarify, just want to clarify what it is. So, so we're going to, staff is going to take all the things that we talked about tonight and provide some recommendations to us, and then we will have another opportunity to take a look at it and vote on what it is that we want in, out, or if it's good.
So it'd be drafting, we would draft a resolution based on tonight's discussion. I'm sorry. Okay, an ordinance, yeah. Draft an ordinance based on tonight's discussion, and then we'd bring that to council. It would have to come back to council twice first reading, second reading. So there's still plenty of time to get feedback, and the council could say, remove this, add this, modify this.
And then the definitions of a multi-unit residence, right?
Yeah.
A lot of definitions have to be explained.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
Do
it.
you need specification on what he means by that?
I think
Just for the record?
Yeah, I think we have enough to draft, and then when we draft it and bring it, it'll be an opportunity to walk through each of those and say if we want to modify them. So
Before we leave the issue, I guess I would just ask, the page 4 of the report outlines specific definitions and recommendations for an ordinance if the council wished to go in the direction it now appears to go in. If there are specific modifications to that list of items, staff would be happy to receive that and sort of incorporate those modifications when we return.
Okay.
Are you good with your motion?
Yes, but I just want to make sure that we clearly define, like, because as we were speaking of this over the years, in my mind, a big apartment complex where everybody's a tenant. And Mayor Lejeune, Surfside 4, and even me, because I have a common wall, just want to make sure that we address to include those in this ordinance. So maybe we'll create a new word, but multi-unit to me is a multi-unit rental place that maybe is owned by one person. And I know we have a number of those in the city of Port Hueneme where it's one building with 6 or 7 apartments that people rent. And I believe that was the focus, but I also believe it's super important to address individual ownerships of these Surfside 4 type, where there's private owners and renters living side by side.
Madam City Attorney, have we gone wayward?
We're getting a little wayward.
I
Yeah, I
saw
think-
your eyes over there.
based on what I've heard tonight, I think we'd look at a definition similar to OHI's for multi-unit residence, where it's a residential property with 2 or more units. And then they say including but not limited to apartment buildings, condos, senior and assisted living facilities, group homes, long-term care facilities, mobile home parks, and campgrounds. So I think that kind of matches what we're talking about tonight, but the council could, still have the opportunity to review that and modify it.
But so that just, we have fire pits at the beach, but we don't have smoking. We don't allow smoking.
We're not talking, that's
we're
not a
getting off-
multi-unit housing.
Yeah, it wouldn't
Okay.
trigger it, but we.
Are we good with
Okay,
your motion?
We can, we have the feed.
I do have one question.
Yes,
You just read a list, but I didn't hear you say anything about townhomes.
Mm-hmm. So we could specifically include townhomes. I think townhomes.
Townhomes
in
would
the
fall under
building code,
multi-unit housing.
It's multi-unit, and I think it's kind of grouped in with condo complexes, but we can specify townhomes, specifically.
I'm just saying that because we're having a difficult time at the property that I live at.
Mhm.
They keep referring to them as condos, and they're not condos.
Yeah,
they're
I know.
Yeah. So we can add, when we bring the definition back, or the ordinance back, we'll have townhomes included in that definition. We'll probably remove campgrounds, is my guess.
Well, it's like my Las Palomas is designated as a private urban dwellings, PUDs. But if you look at the building code, there is a definite definition of multi-unit housing, and I think that's what we should be going on.
And there certainly will be an opportunity to specifically look at this language when we bring the ordinance back for consideration by the council.
We can ask Kathy's husband, right?
Yeah, building inspector Kathy's husband.
Okay. We're good with the motion, Georgiana?
Yes.
Okay, and we have a second already?
Yes.
Okay, please call for the vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next presentation, which will be our next business item, the 2024 Hueneme Beach Festival Summary and Plan for 2025. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. And with that, we have an item on the agenda to kind of recap our 2024 Beach Festival, and more importantly, we're hoping to get council's approval to start planning 2025's Beach Festival. I think the last 2 years we had started with sort of a short window to plan the event, and we're looking to get ahead of it this year. And so we'll recap, and then we'll talk about what we're looking at for next year. On the screen here, we have some photos of Beach Fest. I think a lot of people in the room I recognize from Beach Fest, so I think a lot of people are familiar with it. But it looked a little different this year. A lot of similarities to the past, but it was a different footprint this year, with the intention of moving off of Surfside and minimizing the impacts on the neighborhood and the residents in that area, and instead moving more into the parking lots and enabling us to have less traffic and parking related issues. So from these pictures, it looks very similar to the standard Beach Fest, but anybody who went probably saw it was a little different this year. And so we wanted to recap by starting with the note that when we had our new Beach Fest proposal, we presented that to the Citizens Advisory Commission last year, and then we presented it to the City Council. And since the Beach Fest event, we already have gone back to the Citizens Advisory Commission to sort of walk through the results of Beach Fest and get their feedback on it. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we have some information on some recommendations from the Citizens Advisory Commission. When the council identified assigned tasks for the Citizens Advisory Commission, one of the items was for them to be kind of a review board for the Beach Festival. So we've been going through those processes, and we have their feedback today. In the staff report, we note that the event was fairly successful. I think for us, it's always, it was the first time we had done it in the manner we did it, and whenever you do something for the first time, especially a large-scale event like Beach Fest, there's definitely a learning curve, and there's things that you learn that you want to improve on in future years. So we definitely have our list of things that we want to continue to improve on or continue to expand upon. But I think overall we view it as a pretty successful event. And we did not have any, I almost feel like I'm jinxing us, but we have not had any complaints about the event, which was different from years past. We haven't had any major issues identified. There's just a lot of little things that we learned along the way and that we will look at doing in the future. But when we did Beach Fest this year, we used the Citizen Advisory Commission's feedback that they had provided to the council last year as sort of a guide. And we really went through their recommendations, and we tried to address the items that they had identified as priorities for our city. And so as an example, and I won't go through all of them, but they wanted a renewed focus on involving nonprofits and community groups. So we directly responded to that by lowering the nonprofit fees, by outreaching directly to some of more nonprofits and getting things like the high school bands included in the Beach Fest. And so that's an example where, you know, we had that general guidance from the CAC, and then that went to the council, and the council agreed. And then we had direct changes to Beach Fest to try to match that guidance. Some other guidance they wanted, or they suggested we make the event financially self-sustaining. We'll go through it in a moment, but in the past, the event had lost significant money, and this year we were able to really turn that around and make it more self-sustaining than in the past, while actually reducing costs and reducing things like, or eliminating things like parking fees, for example. So we're very proud of that. If you remember 2 years ago, we talked about having to add an admission fee to continue to do this event. And now instead we've managed to balance the budget without an admission fee and without parking fees. So we're really happy with how we've turned that around. increasing the usage of the beach. We had beach wrestling, and this year we're looking at adding additional events to the beach. We also had the sandcastle tournament. And then the avoiding conflicts with other Ventura County events. And we looked at a new event last year for that, and we are looking ahead. We had wanted to do it earlier in the year, and we're recommending doing it earlier year in the year moving forward. But we didn't have enough time last year, so this year we'll talk a little bit about that and how we are proposing to do it a little earlier in the year moving forward. We did look at one of the options was our recommendations was to reduce the event to a one-day event. We did look at that. We were initially supportive of that, and what we found out, though, is that the actual cost of doing a one-day event isn't much less because you already have to mobilize everything, but you lose significant sponsorship revenue and other revenues, so it ended up, we would have had a negative financial impact. So we ultimately recommended not turning it into a one-day event, and when we went back and we spoke with the Citizen Advisory Commissions recently, it seemed like they were supportive of, understood that and supportive of the two-day event. There was a recommendation for youth involvement and community focus, and we talked about bringing in the youth wrestling tournament, the high school marching band showcase, and the partnership with Police Explorers. So we really focused on those as well. I think one of the areas we identified that we need to improve on in next year is the item that was incorporate the Navy, Chumash, and community groups. We definitely incorporated the community groups, but the Navy and the Chumash, we weren't able to get everybody together on that. I think it was because of the tight time frame and also because of changes with the Navy and the Chumash leadership. Both the Navy leadership had changes in the last year, and the Chumash Tribal Council had changes in the past year. So we expect to have that more involvement in that moving forward. The incorporating sports activities, we already mentioned beach wrestling. We had planned to do either volleyball or soccer, but those leagues weren't available. But this year we already have conversations with some of those about coming out and participating at the new proposed dates that we'll discuss. The CAC had recommended trying to make sure that this was a regional draw. We promoted it across the cities in the county, including local radio, newspaper, etc. And we do know that there was significant turnout from neighboring cities, as well as I think multiple people saw the buses coming from Riverside County that were busing people in. So we do think it was a regional draw. One of the interesting things this year that we talked about was, if people remember, it was that kind of freak heat wave, and it was over 100 degrees everywhere else except for Port Hueneme. And we had hoped that that was going to help us really draw people to our beach event. We heard mixed feedback afterwards. We did hear some people say it was so hot that they didn't want to leave their air conditioning or leave their house to even see if it was cooler anywhere else. So we had thought maybe that would help us, but we've heard kind of mixed feedback. So again, when we look at the plan for this year, we're looking at changing dates to, not that early July is exactly cool, but it hasn't been as hot as kind of that late August time frame the last couple of years. And then one of the other recommendations was to include resources like Ventura County agencies into the event to have some nonprofit booths and things like that. That was a challenge with the reduced planning schedule, but we already have plans for how we're going to do that more effectively for next year's event. One of the recommendations was increasing the event sponsorships, and we're really proud. I would say that was probably our biggest accomplishment, is we really were able to restore and improve our relationship with some of the sponsors, and we were able to actually really have sponsors who had told us that they weren't planning to participate in Beach Fest anymore. And after last year, we kind of got them to give us another chance with the new layout and the new footprint. And they were happy with it and indicating that they want to keep participating. So I think we had a really good reaction with that. And then last was the CAC had recommended considering the festival size and looking at making it a little less impactful to the community. And that was really one of our driving guidelines this year as we modified the layout completely to be less impactful. So those were kind of our guiding principles this year. Like I said, recommendations from the CAC that went through the council and the council agreed. So we focused on those. We had a pretty good success rate, but because of the tight window, we didn't hit every one of those things, but I think we will in the coming year. And then one of those that was a priority for us was the financial sustainability. We did not want to get to a point where we had to come back and recommend charging for admission to Beach Festival. I just think that that would not be a successful event. So we looked, and what we really noticed was that in the past, the expenses had really started to grow. And so we kind of had a strategy. If we were lowering fees and getting rid of parking fees and things like that, it meant we were going to have to spend less money. And so very simply, you can see here that we spent about half as much money as we had in the year prior. And I don't think people walked into the event and immediately felt like, you know, oh, wow, what happened? It's, you know, it's half the cost. But one of the ways we did it was just by being smart and efficient with changing the footprint and not having to have as many security guards and as many officers. And even things, and like in the past, the city would spend, you know, $8,000 to be able to charge for parking revenue that would generate $9,000. And so it wasn't really generating anything. So that was the logic of, well, if we just get rid of parking and we aren't spending that $8,000, then we're not really losing anything. So I think we really, our team really looked at that and found ways to do the event more efficient. And so at the end of the day, we charged less for everything, and the revenue went down because we charged less for everything, but it didn't go down very much. But the expenses we really managed to reduce. So I think that was pretty successful. And then I just want to highlight here that part of how we did that was in the past we had contracts with a variety of contractors to help put on the event. And this year we held the event with our internal staff team working with the police explorers. And so our internal staff team was led by Frank Monalongo, and it included Michelle Gutierrez, Blanca Smith, Veronica Monalongo, Jose Cayoto, Myra Rodriguez, Henry Monalongo, Rick Cervantes, Chris Bates, and Ryan Bates. And a lot of other people contributed, but those were really the main drivers for this festival. And they worked with the explorers and really made this event happen for, as we saw, half the cost that it had been in the past. So at this point, we are recommending, this was a new structure, a new way of doing it. Like I said, we learned a lot. This year was the year, we called it the year that we were trying to build a new airplane while we were still in flight, and we still had to land the plane on the same, on the same date. And so we did that. We had to do a lot of things from scratch. Things like the city had lost its website over the years for Beach Festival, but our team rebuilt the website. And even though with that tight window, we got it built, and we wish we had more time to use it, but now we have it available and we can use it next year, and we can get moving on that now. And that's really just an example of a lot of the work that was done, is we've kind of put all the pieces in place to be able to do this thing effectively next year. And so I think the main thing is we're recommending that the council authorize us to start working on the 2025 Beach Festival under the similar structure to last year's, with one major change, which is we are recommending moving the event. Right now it's kind of an end of summer event, and it's essentially 2 weeks before Banana Festival. And we're recommending moving it up and having it sort of be the summer kickoff event. And then that way there's something for the community at the beginning of the summer and at the end of the summer. Talking with the port, I think they would appreciate as well the idea of spacing the events out a little bit more than in the past. And so we are recommending moving forward with the event on Saturday, July 12th and Sunday, July 13th. And if there's any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Thank you. Does council have any questions for staff?
I'd like to make a motion, but
I have a few questions, and then I have some recommendations. I think I would have liked to have seen what areas of improvement staff intends to make if we go with the existing plan to use staff next year. But first of all, I'd like to ask, I'm sorry?
No.
We used
Yeah, we
staff
used staff
for
this year.
2024. Yeah.
This one, I'm talking
This
about
year.
next year. We haven't decided that yet. So my question is, what was the attendance? Do we have a count on how many people attended both days?
So the city has never taken attendance at the beach festival in the past. There were always estimates given.
Sure.
So the
Yeah.
estimate was similar to the year before, about $20,000 people over 2 days.
Okay.
But that's an example of one of the things we were talking about improving next year is actually for the first time taking attendance.
count,
Yeah,
yeah.
doing an account.
Okay. Was the $25,000 that we donated to the Explorers, where was that included in the budget? Was that under sponsorship?
So
Or did it just get tagged on at the end?
yeah, so on this slide, it's shown that so at the end of after making the $25,000 donation to the Explorers, that would be reduced from the $28,000 surplus, so it would be a $3,000 surplus.
Okay. And then, is there any plan to go back to the community and ask for input? I know we didn't get any complaints, but I think as a matter of practice and courtesy that, you know, the community does see this as their event. Are there any, did the committee come up with any considerations in that area to survey the community about what they thought about the event and what they might like to see this next year?
I think, so we had the CAC public meeting, which was an opportunity for the public to provide any feedback. And in the past, we had gotten feedback, typically not, we rarely get positive feedback from the events, but we would get negative feedback. This year, we didn't get any feedback.
Right.
I think that speaks volumes. But so we had the CAC meeting, we have the public meeting tonight. I would suggest that I think we need to kind of change our pattern from the last couple years of kind of procrastinating on this and then rushing the event. And so I think we really need direction to move forward with the event, especially if we're doing it with our
Sure,
internal
and
team.
I don't think this would be something that would hold back the process or cause any procrastination. But I think at some point, I think it would be a good idea, maybe in the beginning, is just to put out an easy survey. It's like, how did you enjoy the festival? If you have any recommendations, please send them to our website.
Yeah.
Something simple like that, that wouldn't cause a delay.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to suggest is that what we could do is we could have a suggestion. We could post something when we launch the new website and have people make suggestions or provide feedback. So.
Okay. And then I was concerned about the use of staff time. Was there any projects or work that was delayed because the staff was working on the beach festival?
I think it's a lot of work, and so I don't want to downplay it. It's a lot of work, and I think our team, I was really happy that our team took on the challenge head on, but I know I saw them working very hard, so I just want to acknowledge that to start. I think that and we note in the staff report that the estimated cost of the staff time really didn't go up very much from prior years. And I think part of it was that the staff were already heavily involved in the past. So although the involvement shifted a little bit and it kind of went to the staff leading the project, there wasn't really a significant increase in actual hours of staff time put into it. So I think it was a little bit more impactful, but there wasn't any significant impact compared to prior years.
Okay, very good. So do we intend to include the cost of staff time in the future budget? I think we should.
Yeah, and so we included it in the staff report, and
I did see it there, but it's not part of the budget.
right. And so we can show it in the the budget in the future. I think the staff cost has never been shown in the budget, and actually wasn't shown at all in the past, but we want to at least show it. But it wasn't in the budget because it wasn't actually a cost being billed to the project. And so that's something we're looking at, but we can always reflect it on all of these.
Yeah, I think that would be important to do, even though it hasn't been done in the past. I think it's important that we capture those costs because, you know, it is, those are public funds, those taxpayer money. We're putting forth, we've already donated $25,000, and then we're incurring another $27,000 in staff time. And I think if you do the math, we're not breaking even here. I think we're still underwater, and I think we really need to do, you know, calculate truly what the costs of this festival are, even if we do fall behind a little bit. Maybe we need to up our donation in the future. So I just hope we can just be more mindful of the budget and make sure we include those costs.
The budget includes the donation.
Mm-hmm.
So if we weren't counting the donation, we would be ahead. But I think it's important to note that we're about $73,000 better than we were in the year prior. So I don't want that to get lost because that was a result of significant staff effort.
Yeah. But the overage is 28, and the amount that we're donating to, that we're giving to the Explorers is about that same amount. So it looks like we're breaking even.
Pretty much breaking even. And I think when we started this event, I noted cities don't make money off events. You can't.
Right.
Cities can't charge more than the service that we're providing. So you're always going to have a loss with the city, and if you can break even, that's considered good business for a city. So we actually knew we could get close, but we didn't think we would actually break even, especially on the first year. So this is an amazing result from that team that I want to recognize. So.
Yeah, sure. And I do, I don't want to be remiss in saying that I extend my greatest thanks to the committee for their time and effort in organizing the festival and putting on a successful event. I thought it went very well. I did notice some glitches in the planning. I think we could do better on the website. We could do better in notifying vendors of whether or not their applications were received or not. I would like to see perhaps the VIP lounge brought back. Just for if we're going to build relationships with the sponsors, I think it's a very important consideration to have something like that for the sponsors so they can entertain their clients, so we can have an opportunity to interact with them and say thank you. Maybe you call it something else if there's a problem with that, but it's just an idea.
The VIP lounge, I just need to make sure it's clear, is when we propose proceeding with the same footprint as this year, it's not including the VIP lounge, and so that would be a modification. So the council, if the council's interested in that, we can discuss. I think at a very high level, basic level, I would estimate it would shift us $20,000 more to the negative at the VIP lounge.
Okay.
So it's not something I recommend at this time.
All right. I was also told, now I'm getting, what about contracts between the city and the Explorers and the Explorers and the vendors? Are there actual contracts that they're issuing? How's that working? I mean, just want to make sure that we're liability-wise we're covered.
So across events, whether it's Beach Fest or any of the other events that I'm aware of in the county, vendors simply submit an application and pay a fee, and they participate, and they provide insurance and all that, but there's not a contract between the agency and the vendor. So we don't require a contract.
Okay. Do you, and we're okay with that? We're
That's
having them.
That's the typical way that it's done. Yes.
The what?
That's the typical way that it's done for events.
Okay. Okay. I did send you a list of other concerns and questions I had, so I hope maybe you can answer those offline, and I don't want to take up any more time. It's getting late. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I too just wanted to thank the committee for all the hard work that they did in preparing the beach festival for ourselves and for our residents. we're going to take a vote here on what's going to happen next year. I'm feeling kind of bad. I know you guys worked really, really hard. And so I hope things can be, they will be better starting earlier in the planning. So again, just really appreciate all the work that you all did to help us to put that on.
So I think you guys did an amazing job. Anytime that the city can have a plus, even if it's a small plus, that's better than anything, because this event has always been in the negative. It has never been even. So the fact that you are working towards having such a positive deficit, or not deficit, but surplus, that's great. Anytime you can do that, you reduce costs, you reduce impact on communities. I heard nothing but comments, great comments all day long. So no negative feedback, and it's all for a good cause. It went to benefit our explorers. So, which is our, our base youth organization that we love in this community. So, what better way to do that?
Question. We're still in questions, right?
Yes, but I'm giving comments. Hold on, just chill. So, I just want to say thank you to staff and everyone who did this, and look forward to what you're going to do next year. So, Councilmember Gama.
So last year, if we were to factor in the labor costs that weren't factored in, then we lost $100,000, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then also, the staff in question, I imagine they're mostly salaried staff, so they're going to get their salary regardless, and the only thing that we're really talking about is overtime. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, extremely successful event by any measure. In fact, almost seemingly impossible considering what we were told in the previous years and the fact that we lost nearly $100,000 as opposed to $70,000. So it cuts both ways, and I just wanted to take the time to thank the work of all staff and particularly the Montelongos for what they did. Amazing.
Okay. So are there any public comments regarding this item?
No public comments.
Thank you. So the recommendation is to receive an informational report about the event details associated with the 2024 Hueneme Beach Festival, and to authorize staff to plan the 2025 Hueneme Beach Festival under the current structure to be held on Saturday, July 12th and Sunday, July 13th, 2025. Can I have a motion?
Motion to approve staff's recommendations.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yes, if I may, Mayor. I also want to say thank you to the committee and all the staff that worked on this event. I think it's the best beach festival ever. And I understand some of the council members said that there's ways to improve, here and there. But there's always room for improvement. And considering that, staff took over, and I want to say this was the most successful event possible. And then this was a $100,000 shift. So this is huge. That's what we should really be talking about, not necessarily the little things that we can improve. I think the committee's gonna come back and have even more ideas, and I look forward to your ideas. But this is more than what we can ask for, and I just want to say thank you.
Councilmember Gama? Councilmember Hernandez?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the recommendation to have the committee come back on a regular basis and update us. And the reason I'm offering these recommendations is because let's start early on, rather than come in 6 months from now and then we'll say, hey, what about this? Hey, what about that? I think that's the reason that I brought it up tonight. So it's not that I'm not appreciative, because I very much am, and I just don't want us coming in the 11th hour and saying, do this, do that. So
I do have a question about the wrestling. How does anyone know how successful that was? I never heard any feedback about that.
It was pretty awesome. I watched the session, and I couldn't believe the enthusiasm of the enthusiasm of the participants, the program, and I think it's going to do much better. But it was, because I was very interested, like, wait a minute, beach wrestling, how is this going to go? But it's a sport, and it's pretty, I mean, it is so entertaining and fun to watch, especially the little kids.
Okay, so we had a motion and a second, correct?
Yes.
Madam Clerk?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Moving on to the next business item is the waiver of fees associated with Orvine S. Carpenter's use of Community Center Auditorium for his 100th birthday celebration. Staff, please present the report.
Thank you, and this one I think will be brief. At our last council meeting, October 7th, Councilmember Gama made a motion, seconded by Councilmember Martinez, and approved by the entire city council to bring an item back on a future agenda to consider waiving fees associated with the use of the Orvine S. Carpenter Community Center by Orvine S. Carpenter for his 100th birthday. So we had a hard time finding somebody who was willing to say not to let Orvine use the building. So it's a tough one. So we did reach out to his family though, just to get a little more information on exactly what the request was and to make sure that we had the correct dates and it was the date that we had blocked, had availability and everything. So the good news is we do have availability. Mr. Carpenter's family has requested, hopefully it's not a surprise party because we've ruined that, but and they've requested a private birthday celebration for Mr. Carpenter on Friday, January 31st, private family celebration. They were flattered that we'd consider waiving the rental fees, and so they are requesting that we approve that. The facility's available. We have an event the next day, so it just the real impact is that we just have to kind of be able to turn the center around in a short window. But I think it's something we're all willing to do to make happen for Mr. Carpenter, especially because we also talked him into attending our Veterans Day event and being honored there. I guess before I turn it over, I should mention, because I think we all know Orvine, or Mr. Carpenter, but for anybody who doesn't, the community center is named after him. He was the longest serving Port Hueneme council member, had 32 years from 1964 to 1996, which just imagine how much changed in that period. But longest serving council member, he also served in the United States Marines during World War II, the Army during the Korean War, and retired from the United States Post Office as postmaster after serving as postmaster in Hueneme and Oxnard. So his credentials are pretty hard to beat, and so we recommend that council adopt the resolution approving that fee waiver and authorizing us to allow them to use the community center on Friday, January 31st from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. for his 100th birthday.
Thank you. Does council have any questions? Seeing none, are there any public comments?
No public comments.
Okay, so the recommendation is to adopt a resolution waiving fees associated with Orvine S. Carpenter's use of the auditorium at the Orvine S. Carpenter Community Center on Friday, January 31st, 2025, from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. to hold a private event celebrating his 100th birthday. Can I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And the final business item is the Channel Islands Harbor Dredging Project update. And staff, please present the report.
Thank you. Yeah, that one we knew could have gotten away on consent, but we figured it was kind of just cool to talk about that one. So thank you for bearing with us. Last item is Channel Islands Harbor Dredging Project update. We've talked about this a couple times at council recently, just to sort of remind everybody, so we are due for our dredging project this year, which is the project to re-nourish Hueneme Beach and to get sand back on Hueneme Beach. And so we were due for the project this year. We had an issue earlier this year where the project was at risk because of some federal budget related issues. And so we came to the council and we got the approval from the council to advocate for, on behalf of the city as needed to stay on the project. And so we were able to, working with the port and the Channel Islands Harbor and Beacon and other advocates, we were all able to work together, and we solved that budget-related issue that had come up back in April. And we've stayed on it, and about maybe 6 weeks ago, we heard that it had hit another roadblock. And really the roadblock in a nutshell is the federal Army Corps of Engineers and the state water quality control boards weren't communicating. And the permits that the state issued weren't acceptable to the Federal Army Corps of Engineers, and the Federal Army Corps of Engineers and the state were kind of each saying that, you know, the other party needed to be responsive to that issue. And so we sensed that it was starting to hit a roadblock. And so for the last 6 weeks, the port and CEO Kristen Dekas, the Harbor and Channel Islands Harbor Director Michael Tripp, and myself have been working to really get the right people in the room to work through the issues and get this project back on track. And so we have, it seems like with this project, whenever we get good news, there's always like mostly good news and then a little bit of bad news. And so the good news that we got just recently, because we put this on the agenda knowing that an update was coming in, and the good news is that we've now been told that that issue is being successfully worked through, and it's putting the project, it should be back on, or it should be moving forward. The bad news is that right this minute, their estimated start date, because of the speed bump, is that they're estimating starting the first week of December rather than the first week of November. And so we've already had a couple follow-up conversations and trying to sort of advocate that, you know, if the start date gets delayed that month, that the state and the Army Corps of Engineers and everybody make sure that we're still getting the sand we need, you know, that it's just a timing issue. So that's what we're working on now. We're getting pretty good feedback that they think that the project is really going to move forward in that first week of December, but it's just something we're continuing to watch and to advocate on. And so when we brought the item, we hadn't heard back yet that they had worked through that obstacle, so that's really good news. We had prepared a letter, and we had recommended that the city council consider sending, and just for the record, so I have sent similar letters to this, very similar letters, but I just think it kind of ups the importance, and it gets maybe more people's attentions when it's coming on behalf of the city council. So at this point, although we got good news and it looks like we're getting back on track, I recommend that the council still authorize the mayor to sign letters as needed on this, and just so that we can continue to advocate on behalf of the city council. And so, again, I think mostly good news. And at this point, we're going to keep working to try to keep pushing to make sure that we keep getting this project back on track. But with that, we recommend council authorize the mayor to sign letters on behalf of the city council to state and federal representatives on this project. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Vega?
I do. I just wanted to try and simplify this so the public understands. My understanding was that the State Water Resource Board, under Section 401 permit process, changed the rules and basically said you have to clean the material before you deposit it on Hueneme Beach. Is that correct?
Essentially, the state has stricter standards than the federal government, and was trying to hold the federal government to those standards.
Right. And so if you know anything about the dredging project, that would be,
They want us to clean the sand?
it would be twice as expensive. It would, and so, and then the other important issue, you know, we go through this every 2 years. Last year it was or last cycle, 2 years ago, it was the air pollution credit. So have we looked into that with all our involved parties? And are we going to be okay on the air pollution credits? And the window too. I think the window also?
The window is a challenge, and that's one of the main things is that for a variety of reasons, there's only a very limited window that they can do this project. So that's why
Right.
them pushing a month doesn't seem like a lot, and especially to like the federal government, that doesn't seem like a lot. But we've really, a lot of our advocacy the last couple weeks has been helping them understand that that actually is critical to this project, and so that's something we've been trying to educate them on.
Yeah, and I think we should, when we go to Washington, we should go to Washington solely to make sure that this project gets completed timely, because we've had problems for 50 years. But and the other question I have is the sand amount. Do we have a number? We're supposed to get 4.2 million cubic yards to mimic
2.4.
2.4 million cubic yards
is what we're
per
supposed to
year,
get.
right? So
Yeah.
for the total project is, right?
And so on Friday, the big obstacle is we needed to get the project to go out to bid, and we got it to go out to bid on Friday. And so on Friday, you can read all the bid materials; it's all available. But the bid materials show that a minimum of 1.6 million cubic. Is it yards? Yeah, 1.6 million cubic yards. We brought that up to them that, hey, this is supposed to be a 2.4 million cubic yard project, and they just reiterated that's the minimum. And so that's the only number we've seen anywhere. It's essentially them saying that the contract is going to have that as a minimum, but that's something we're still trying to educate them on. So.
Okay.
And advocate with.
Yes, yeah, thank you for your efforts in advocating for the project. We do go to Washington, we meaning the county does go to Washington. They have a lobbyist, and I just want to make sure that that's the only agency that we should be working with. When you talk about multiple agencies, really we should be working directly through the county on this project, correct?
We have
except for advocacy. I mean, when we sign letters, we can.
Yes.
But the county is really the lead agency.
So several local agencies are working together on the advocacy. The project itself is assigned to the county harbor district.
Yeah. And so just so the public understands, when we get the port involved or the Navy involved, they're dealing with a permit issue and not the funding issue, because the funding is coming from separate pots of money, separate funding streams. So I think that's important to note. But thank you very much for your work. Based on the information from the Army Corps of Engineers in the bid that's now open, are these letters still necessary to be signed, or are we holding back now on these letters?
I would suggest that the council authorize the letters, and if we don't need to send it, we won't. But if we get a call on, which very well could happen, if something goes wrong with the bid and we get a call on Friday that it's not moving forward, then we can have the mayor sign a letter. So that's my recommendation.
Okay, thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem? The permitting issue, you said this is a new issue that's come up?
Recent.
Yeah, the section 401 is a newer requirement.
So we've never had to deal with it before. They decided to create this new one as of recently?
The county's never had to deal with it before.
Yes, and it's very frustrating, but like on a big picture, the state, especially state of California, we're always sort of, requiring sort of additional environmental requirements. And so there's probably some good aspects of it. It just really impacts our project negatively because our project, the Army Corps of Engineers, just weren't comfortable that they could actually meet the standard. And
Well,
so-
in fact, it affects every single dredging project in the United States.
Yeah, that's an important note for anybody watching who thinks maybe somebody on this project just dropped the ball somewhere. It's impacting every project. It's just that ours was next in line, so we jumped on it. But the project after ours is Ventura, and we've gotten them involved in the conversation, and they have the same, they're now getting involved in the conversation to try to solve their problem. And then the next project after the two of us is Oceanside, and so we're getting them involved in the conversation too. So it impacts the whole coast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any public comments on this item?
No public comments.
Okay, so the recommendation is to receive,
Councilman Gama had a comment.
okay.
Wanted to mention that at the Channel Cities meeting Councilmember Hernandez and I were in the meeting. Councilmember Hernandez had to leave a few minutes early, so she missed this part, but basically made the other cities aware of this rule change, and cell phones were coming out, texting was happening, and there was a number of cities that would equally be impacted for it. So I just want to commend the city manager for his efforts, because we can't rely on other people, other agencies. We have to look out for ourselves. And I mean, I know it's the county's thing, but hey, we have to look out for ourselves, because we know what happens if we don't get the sand. It's not a good thing. And so I think it's a great effort for everybody involved, and I look forward to moving forward.
If I could real quickly just note too, I want to give some credit to Letitia Austin from the port, who has really jumped in and getting everybody in the room and getting all the representatives there. So so it's definitely been a team effort, and with someone like Letitia pulling more than her fair weight on something like this. So.
Who happens to be in the audience.
I have one more comment, and I just wanted to share with the council that I was voted in as vice president for the Channel Cities division of the League of California Cities. So I'm happy to take this issue and help other cities advocate on this permitting issue as requested. So thank you.
The recommendation is to receive an update on the Channel Islands Harbor Dredging Project, which impacts Hueneme Beach, and expressly authorize the mayor to sign letters on behalf of the city council to highlight the significance of this project to state and federal representatives. May I have a motion and a second?
I guess, can I add to that, just to clarify to what Councilmember Hernandez said, is with that recommendation, the only change is now it's kind of as needed, and not, we won't just automatically send the letter. So we'll send one if the need arises to send another letter. The mayor will be authorized to sign that letter.
Can I have a motion with the stated recommendation from City Manager Vega?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Madam Clerk?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We will now move on to City Manager comments and reports.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of quick updates we wanted to provide. One, first, people may have seen the short video we posted on some of our social media, but we were able to go out and get some video and some photos of the work going on at the Bubbling Springs Park. And it's funny with things like park projects, is for a long time it looks like not much is happening, and then all of a sudden you like blink and everything's there. And I think we kind of hit that point where the snack bar is built, the new bathrooms over by the baseball fields are built, the baseball fields are seeded, and the grass is growing in, and all of a sudden it's looking like the very nice park that it's going to be very shortly. And so that video is available. We have a little QR code people can scan if they want to check it out, or just go to our Instagram or social media pages, or just drive by. I think right at this point, especially if you drive by in the morning, you'll see the teams of people out there that are working on this project with the goal of getting this project done in March. So they are working actively out there, and it's getting exciting where you like go out and you just like, now you can start picturing what it's going to look like when we have hundreds of kids out there playing, and so it's really coming along. So so you can check out our website and our social media for that. The other thing we wanted to just remind everybody about is we have the mural internship opportunity for the mural that's going in at the library. The deadline to apply for the mural is October 31st, which is coming up somehow. It's only a week or so away. And so there's still an opportunity to apply for residents of Port Hueneme from the ages of 18 to 22. And you'll have an opportunity to work with the artists who are putting this mural together. And we went out and we did our site prep for those walls the last couple of days. So that's another project that before you know it, it's going to be up. I think they're going to start painting November 26th and expect to be done the first week of December. So it's coming. And then this one people may not be so happy about. I know driving through work zones.
Oh.
Yeah, I've been driving through it
Yeah.
too. So it's not fun. But the good news is we are resurfacing the Channel Islands, and we're already about halfway through the project. So the project is planned. It started October 18th through November 1st. We tried to make sure we worked around rush hour, so it's 8:30 to 3:30. So hopefully most people are avoiding that, but we know that that's a very visible one. But Channel Islands will be completely resurfaced at the end of this month. So it's about halfway done, maybe a little less, maybe a little less. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So we have that project going. We also, at the same time, similar the beach walkway. If anybody's been to the beach in the last couple of weeks, you'll see the construction walls up, and you'll see people starting to work on the walkways out there. So that project's going. And the exciting thing there that I think people are excited about, and you can see it on the photo, I know it's small, but is the concrete path to the new swing set is going to be part of that. So that one's exciting as well. And then last council meeting, the council asked us to analyze a blind spot at Channel Islands and Lido turning into Hueneme Bay. And our team went out to look at it, and I think we identified, it almost seems too easy, which is rare, but we identified a dead hedge as the problem, which usually usually there's like a huge obstacle or something that's difficult to remove, but it looked like it was a dead hedge causing the problem, so we pulled the hedge out. So we didn't spend a whole lot of time analyzing it, but there's a photo here, and we went out and looked, and it's a visible difference. So hopefully that addresses that issue, but we'll see if we hear anything else on it. We have some upcoming events. Our Spooktacular celebration with our recreation department is this Wednesday, October 23rd from 5 to 8 p.m. at Miranda Park. There's going to be music, treats, a pumpkin patch, train rides, carnival games, and more. So come out and join us, and hopefully people have their costumes ready by this Wednesday. And then the senior holiday luncheon is coming on December 10th, but tickets are for sale on November 4th. That is the priority ticket sales, which is exclusive to Port Hueneme residents from November 4th through 8th, and then general ticket sales open November 12th. The first feedback we got was some feedback from people saying that we raised the price too much because $12 is the highest price. And just for the record, it's been that price for years. So I know everything's going up, so I think people are expecting that, but we somehow keep this at $12 a ticket. So hopefully people have the opportunity to get their tickets from the 4th to the 8th, and then they'll open up for general sales on November 12th. And then around that same time, Monday, November 11th, we have our Veterans Day ceremony. I mentioned earlier that we've talked to Orvine Carpenter to allowing us to give him a special veterans tribute. And we also want to thank the Navy. We were able to get Captain Daniel Bensey to be our keynote speaker from our Navy base. That was a real accomplishment on our with our team and our rec team, because the Navy does so much on these holidays that it's actually very hard to get the Navy representatives at these events. So we were able to get them early, and they'll be our keynote speaker. So that's Monday, November 11th at 8:30 a.m. at City Hall. And then for our next council meeting, we have a couple of items scheduled now. We have a public hearing for Hueneme Bay has applied for a Wi-Fi communication tower, so that'll be on that agenda. We also have community and economic development, what we're calling kind of an ordinance cleanup which is a lot of the state rules and things that have changed over the last couple of years. We're doing an ordinance cleanup to make sure that everything we're doing complies with state law. And so those are the two public hearings. And then we have two business items. One is a request from REACH for the council to consider the board composition and specifically provide some direction on what was historically a city spot on the board. So we'll explain that. And then we're going to bring the city council calendar at this meeting for 2025 so we could start planning for next year. So that's the plan for the November 4th agenda. And that's all I have.
All right, so we'll move on to council members' reports and comments. Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you, Mayor Perez. I just want to mention that there's going to be a pickleball tournament on November 9th. It's a doubles tournament, so it's you have to have a partner. And if you sign up via Eventbrite before the end of the month on the 28th, you can also get a free t-shirt for the event. Thank you.
Like Council Member Hernandez has a little bit of allergy issues, so I'm not going to speak too much, but I do want to tell you that I attended the Cal League of Cities, as did our city attorney and Council Member Hernandez. Had a wonderful speaker, Celeste Headley, and we're emailing too much, people. We got to start picking up the phone and waving to people. And there's a lot of neuroscience to back it up, the benefits of it, but emailing and texting is having a negative effect on us. And so we Homo sapiens are the most unique species. We can openly communicate, and oftentimes we can agree. And sometimes we could disagree, but if we're actively communicating with words in front of each other, we bond a stronger relationship and don't end up in two camps, kind of like the way we are across the country right now. So I purchased her book, and I'll be reading it, and I'm going to share it with all of us. But this speaker was amazing. And that's the one thing about the Cal Cities. They do bring amazing keynote speakers that really bring value to what we're doing. I attended a number of trainings. One of them was titled "Show Me the Money," trying to bring as much revenue to the city as possible, because a city is not like a school district. A school district has a built-in revenue stream because you just got to get the kids to come to school. A city, we have to create opportunity. We have to manage fiscal responsibility. We have to figure out how to make new revenue streams. And so it's a little more challenging for a city to be responsive in terms of revenue generation and being a great city. And I think we're on the right path. I think we're just shown that with our beach festival results. I mean, that's a heck of a turnaround. I don't know what other public agency could boast what we did. And again, just want to thank Montelongo for that. We were fortunate at Hueneme Beach Cleanup. Amgen stepped up and gave us $1,000 worth of new grabbers. And so the grabbers, I have a bucket in my garage of about 30 of them that are broken. And so wonderful. And I really want to take the time to thank Tanya Nunez for that and getting Amgen involved. Also, it occurred to me in the risk management circles of the world, you have to be able to demonstrate an ability of to be agile. And as we were hearing from a resident last couple weeks ago, the ADU and parking. So the state says you have to do this, but there's no parking for provision. And we know that in the city of Port Hueneme, we have parking problems. And now in some of these areas, we're getting these ADUs installed, and that's going to bring 2 or possibly 3 more cars. So I think we need to take a look at our ordinance because our ordinance says 40% of your front area only 40% could be concreted over for parking. And so some of our older homes that have big lots, they have a single car threshold. And then they have a pie shape. So 40% of a very small area, and so we've created a situation where I think we need to take a look at adjusting that and trying to find ways to get more parking when these ADUs are coming into being. Every Saturday, Hueneme Beach Cleanup, we meet at the Alaska 261 Memorial. We have an early start at 7:30 and an official start time at 8:30 till 10. It's a great wellness experience, and if any of you want to come and enjoy wellness in the beach, we'll be there waiting for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all. Okay, a lot's been going on in October, end of September. I did attend the One County, One Book program, which was focused on homelessness. We heard from the character, well, not a character, but an individual who was the topic of a book called Rough Sleepers, and he talked about, this was a Dr. Jim O'Connell, who spoke about his experience in the streets of Boston working with the homeless, and it was an excellent panel. We had the Continuum of Care representative there, Allie, and Kay Wilson-Bolton from Santa Paula. We had members from Cal State Channel Islands who work with the student population there who are homeless, and just a really good, presentation and panel. I hope I can share more later, maybe as we get into that, if we get into that topic later on in the year or next year. I also attended the Medal of Valor awards dinner, and we honored one of our own, investigator Ricardo Miranda, has a nominee for Investigator of the Year, so congratulations to him and his family. Also attended the Friends of the Library Victorian High Tea yesterday. It was a lot of fun. It's the annual fundraiser for the Ray D. Pewter Friends of the Library, and it was a great event. Also attended the VCOG dinner, Ventura County Organization of Governments, and that was really nice event. And then the Cal League of Cities, and what I did there this year was to kind of challenge myself and focus on an area that I'm not that familiar with, and that was economic development. So I attended several economic development workshops, spoke to people about economic development. I've got a list of ideas, and I'm going to start feeding those to you, James, and to Tony. As these ideas come, I don't know if you're starting to build a list of concepts and ideas that we might consider as we implement our economic development plan. But a lot of these are just low-hanging fruit, simple things that we can do. So if that's okay with you, I'll just send you those ideas, unless you've got a better way to collect those.
Yeah, we were talking about actually 2 items based on something Councilmember Gama mentioned and something you just mentioned, the economic development. We were talking about having an item that comes back to start talking about how we're going to implement some of these things. So I think we'll have an opportunity to do that, and then brainstorm. And then not to change the subject back, but the parking that was just mentioned too, we also are talking at our staff level about looking at some ordinances that we could present to the council, just to see if there's any interest in adjusting some of those things. So those are 2 items we're sort of starting to work on for future council meetings. So.
Oh, and I was just remiss in not recognizing the port, who hosted VCOG visitors from as far as the Inland Empire came out, and we also took the time to recognize Carmen Ramirez on the final day. So it was a well-attended event, and I want to thank the port for hosting us and showing us around. So thank you. That's all I have.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes. A couple of things. I've been able to attend all my meetings. I'm also participated in the Friends of the Library High Tea. It was very nice, very nice. And then Councilwoman Hernandez and I, we attended the Knights of Columbus Civic Night, where they thank elected officials and public officials for their service, public service. So that's it. Thank you.
I attended all my meetings as well. The high tea hosted my first table, so that was fun. I was not able to go to the VCOG due to the CERT training that's taking place right now every Thursday for the next, I think we have 4 more weeks of that. And I was unable to attend. I usually go to the Civic Night. I've been doing that for the past 4 years, but I was unable to do so this year. And that's all I have for this month.
And I also want to share with you that I attended the 60th anniversary of the Evangelical Missionary Baptist Church here on Pearl Street. They were celebrating 60 years. And and they were also recognizing the city of Port Hueneme for their support. And it was a very nice service. And I want to wish them another 60 years and congratulations on their 60-year anniversary.
I just want to recognize the world's greatest librarian, Timothy Fergal, right there. And he is without a home in Hueneme, and it's coming, and I can't wait to get you in there and practice your craft. But if you haven't met Tim and if you haven't spoken with him, I'm telling you, the world's greatest librarian right here in the city of Port Hueneme.
We'll next move on to future agenda items. Please note all council members that a requested item will need a motion, a second, and a majority vote per the adopted council policies to be placed on a future agenda. Councilmember Martinez, Councilmember Gama, Councilmember Hernandez. Mayor Pro Tem? Nothing for me either. So then, if there is nothing else, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. I apologize, Bobby, I did not do it by 7:30. But it is 9:05.